Hey guys, hoping all is well with everyone. So in this video, we're going to be continuing our read-along of the Secret Zoo Traps and Specters. And the last time we finished off, we completed chapter 26, so we're going to be starting with chapter 27 today. But just as a quick recap, in chapter 25, the scouts were going to a Halloween party at Clarkville Elementary. Noah was dressed up as a soldier. Ella was dressed up as Wonder Woman. Megan was dressed up as a pirate, and Richie, your friend and mine, was dressed up as Mega Nerd. So they all kind of had fun with their costumes and kind of just took themselves out of the reality of their real world lives at the moment just to have a fun night of relaxing and taking it easy and not having the stress of the literal world crumbling like an being in jeopardy in terms of the two worlds that they currently live in. And then in chapter 26, Tank was in a particular area of the secret zoo where he saw a very peculiar and what seemed very um, uneasy kind of feeling about this fog that he saw, and it was very mysterious fog. It was like very eerie, like it came out of nowhere, but it wasn't like your typical fog that just like kind of limits your visibility for a while. It was very strange. So we're going to be continuing with chapter 27 today, and let's jump into it. Chapter 27, Trick or Treat. Outside of Clarkville Elementary, the younger kids found their parents and the older kids found their friends. In groups, they headed toward the foggy neighborhood and its promise of free candy. An uneven chorus of "Trick or treat" sounded as Jenkins Street was invaded, with miniature monsters and superheroes and ballerinas swinging plastic bags and plastic pumpkins. As the scouts ran from house to house, they cut through lawns, dodged bushes, and squeezed through hedges. On porches, they held open their bags to claim their sugary loot. The fog continued to thicken, but the scouts barely noticed. By 8 o'clock, their bags were half full. As the four friends headed down Flock's Drive, a man ran up to them. Charlie Red. He stopped in front of the scouts. "Charlie," Noah said, "what are you—" "We got a problem," Charlie said. "What's going on?" "This fog," Charlie gestured with a sweep of an arm. "It's all over Clarksville Zoo. We're worried Degraff might use it to move on us." The thought sent a wave of panic through Noah, and a splash of shame. The scouts had been running up and down the streets with nothing but candy on their minds. They had been behaving like children, not like crossers, not like select individuals pledged to protect the world. "What do we do?" Megan asked. "We've already sent Tarsiers out, and the Descenders, they're moving into position. We have—" "The Descenders," Ella said, "but there are people everywhere. What if—" "We got no choice," Charlie said. Understanding this, the scouts kept quiet. Charlie continued. "The Specters, they're out too, and Darby's making sure every possible portal in the secret zoo is guarded." Charlie's face changed with a new thought, and he said, "You guys have your headsets?" The four friends shook their heads. Again, Noah felt a bit disgusted at himself. Charlie reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out 4 headsets, the sort of the scouts had learned to use. "Take these." He threw one to each of the friends. As they fitted them into the ears, Charlie added, "Divide up. If you spot anything, radio it in." Then he turned and ran. Within seconds, he disappeared into the darkness, the misty air swirling in his wake. The scouts stared at one another. It was Noah who finally broke the silence. "Let's go." The scouts split off in different directions, hoping to cover as much ground as possible. Noah found himself glancing all around, suddenly sure Degraff could be anywhere. Chapter 28. The Hunt Begins. Noah headed down Jenkins Street, which bordered 3 sides of the Clarksville Zoo, and turned onto Timber Trail, a winding road surrounded by old homes. Tall oaks stretched their mighty limbs across the street, making Timber Trail seem like a tunnel cut through a small forest. He walked briskly, trying to remain calm and not call attention to himself. Empty-handed, he'd since dropped his bag of candy and toy machine gun. Along the curb sat jack-o'-lanterns, their expressions seemingly carved out of their darkness rather than the pulpy shelves of pumpkins. Children rushed between houses, and chants of "trick or treat" sounded from all directions. Adults followed their kids, and wagons carrying costume-clad toddlers rumbled along. In Noah's head, a sudden thought washed all away the others. What if Degraff was in a costume? He turned to the adults, many of whom were dressed up. He saw a princess, an Indiana Jones, and the Grim Reaper, the shaft of his scythe propped against his shoulder. Man, this is not good, Noah said to himself. Excuse me? Noah looked over to see a man dressed in a beige jumpsuit with a patch of a cartoonish ghost stitched to one shoulder. The ghost was enclosed in a red circle with a diagonal line. A ghostbuster. You say something? The man asked. Noah's sentence faded away, and he hurried off. Down the street he went, searching all around. As he neared the end of Timber Trail, he touched the transmit button on his earpiece and said, "Guys, can you hear me?" When all the scouts answered yes, Noah then asked if anyone had seen anything. No was their response. Chapter 29. The False Alarm. Megan headed down Zinnia Street, which branched from Jenkins Street to join several other side roads. She scanned the foggy landscape for Degraff, her plastic sword swinging with her stride. This is hopeless, she thought. She saw something then, a dark figure standing between two houses. She halted and peered at it. A man masked in fog and shadow. I see something, she whispered, the vibrations in her skull transmitting her voice into the ears of the scouts. A new voice suddenly came through the speaker. What do you got? It was Tamarin, which meant the Descenders had crossed to the outside and joined their radio channel. Someone, Megan said. I don't know. He looks suspicious. Roger that, Tamarin said. Sam, you getting this? Apparently the two were separated. The Descenders had likely divided up, like the Scouts. Roger, Sam said. Megan, tell us what you see. But before Megan could say more, two trick-or-treaters rushed up to the man and led him across a yard. Megan's shoulders slumped with disappointment and a bit of relief. False alarm. It was just a parent. Okay, Sam said. Stay up. Just then, someone grunted so loudly into their airwaves that Megan flinched. The sudden sound was followed by a soft moan that soon shaped into words that raised a complaint about an injured bud. Who was that? Sam asked, his tone crisp and quick with concern. It was Ella who provided the answer. I'll give you a hint. He tells bad jokes and knows more about atomic matter than your average scientist. Sam didn't need another clue. Richie, you okay? Chapter 30. The Man on Old Cove. Richie lay in a ditch, his glasses askew and his bag of candy spilled out beside him. He realized the sky was barely visible through the fog. Sam's voice rose in his ear again. Richie, you all right, man? I fell. It was all Richie could think to say. How? Richie glanced toward the street, where a once parked radio flyer wagon was now tipped on its side. I tripped. On a wagon. Get up, Ella said curtly. You didn't break anything. And how could you possibly know that? Because I've seen you not break something 1,000,000 times. As Richie sat up, miniature candy bars and pixie sticks spilled down his chest. He stood and steadied himself. Then he freed his underwear from his rear end and continued down the street, his bag of candy now almost empty. Okay, Richie said. He straightened his glasses and adjusted his checkered nerd pants, pulling them high above his skinny stomach. I'm on the move again. Roger, said Sam. How does your street look? He scanned the houses. He couldn't see too far in the fog. Everything looks good, I guess. The airwaves fell silent. For the next 15 minutes, the fog continued to thicken. It seemed to be slowly devouring the neighborhood, consuming houses and kids and cars. Porch lights struggled just to reach the street, and parents had begun to keep their children close. An intersection rose out of the fog, and a street sign took shape. Richie had looped back around to Jenkins. He announced his position into his headset and headed down the road. More time passed. Richie saw fewer kids trick-or-treating, and porch lights were beginning to blink out. The other crossers occasionally announced their positions. This is Noah. I'm headed onto Williams Road. Ella here. I just cut over to Fox Drive, but almost the airwaves stayed silent. As Richie passed down Jenkins Street, his eyes kept gravitating toward the Clarkville Zoo wall, which he couldn't faintly see through the spaces between the houses. It looked eerie in the fog, long and gray and winding. It had occasional cavities with large pieces of weathered concrete had crumbled away. Ivy clung to segments. Branches crept over its top like the hooked legs of a giant spider. Realizing the streets were almost empty, Richie whispered, Anyone know what time it is? It's almost 9, someone said. Richie thought it had been Megan. Solana spoke up. Halloween's almost over then, at least by Clarksville's clock. Richie veered onto another side street that continued straight for at least 100 feet before curving back toward the Clarksville Zoo. As he came around the bend, he stopped so suddenly that his glasses jumped an inch down his nose. About 30 feet ahead of him, a man was headed in the same direction as Richie. He wore a hat with a wide circular brim and a trench coat, a long flowing trench coat that stopped at his ankles. Richie forced down a deep breath and said, Guys, I have something here. A man, and he's dressed like Degraff. The airwaves stayed silent for a few seconds. Then Noah's voice filled Richie's head. Where are you? It took a moment for Richie to realize someone had spoken to him. He reached into his memory, discovered the question, and tried to remember where he was. Jenkins Street? No, Walker's Boulevard. Not there either. Richie? A side street. He turned his head and peered at a street sign until the words came into focus. Old Cove. I'm on Old Cove. The man, Sam said. What exactly is he wearing? The man was beginning to sink into the fog, so Richie hurried toward a few steps. A fedora hat? And a trench coat? I'm behind him. I can't see much. How tall? Someone said. Richie couldn't think enough to answer. Richie? How tall? He concentrated. Tall? More than 6 feet. Silence claimed the airwaves. Finally, Sam said, All right, everyone, give me your positions. One by one, the crossers announced the streets they were on. Ella and Noah were just a few blocks over from Richie. Sam told them to get over to Old Cove. Richie, Sam said, get closer to that guy, but don't let him spot you. Get a better look and let us know what you see. You got it? Yeah, Richie said. Get close. Richie picked up his pace, the moist air curling around him as he moved in on the shadowy man. And I'll stop the video there, ending chapter 30. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and in our continuation of The Secret Zoo, we're going to be continuing next time with chapter 31. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please take good care of yourselves and be safe, and I look forward to seeing you next time where we'll be continuing our read-along of The Secret Zoo. Take good care. Bye.